All right, we're back. It is COMP305, and looks like we're glitch-free this recording. And it's the fall 2016 semester, and we are week 10, part 2 of our broadcast at Centennial. All right. So we built our maze. Last recording, last part. Let's get back into Unity here. And here's lesson 10b. One thing I didn't do was adjust lighting. And what I recommend again is that from a lighting perspective, if you see this message, you change it to non-directional. And you turn off auto baking, especially when you move from one scene to another, right? Or auto build, and build it manually. And when you bake the lights manually like this, right, it's going to do its thing. But in the scenes folder, it's going to add another folder called the same name of the scene, where it keeps the lighting information, right? That's where it is. So that's our kind of our bake. Okay, cool. So we've baked our scene. Now what I want to do is I want to add our minimap. How do I do this? And what is a minimap? Well, if I was going to look online and see what it is, if I said minimap, just give you an idea of what that is. And if I went to images, right, you can see what it looks like. Some of them are circular like this. Other ones are kind of square like this, and it kind of tells you where you are in the game, right? You can also do mini-maps like this. It's just an overlay, right? So basically what you do is you want to do something like this, but then the overlay kind of comes on top. For now, for today, we're going to make like a rectangular mini-map like this, which we're going to put in the game. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, the mini-map must follow the player. That's what's going to happen, right? So in essence, we can make a camera that instead of pointing straight out from the player, is pointing at the player from above, right? So let's add a camera to the player object. So right-click on the player, and we'll say add a camera. And if I kind of zoom into the player, the camera, you can see that the camera is projecting outwards this way. What we want to do, right, is we want to rotate it across the x-axis so that it points down. So this is the x-axis of the camera. We want to rotate it across the x-axis, right? And if you notice, if I rotate the camera, we want to make it point down. So I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees. Oh. There we go. That's on one. Second thing is we want to position it way up high. So let's move it up to about 30 meters. Right? So this is what it's looking at right now. It kind of looks at the player from way up here. Right? So 30 meters, something like that. It's way higher than all the buildings, and it's looking down at the player like a direct line. Okay. Right now, it's seeing everything, including the skybox. But this camera can't see the skybox. It's going to see solid color only, right? And it's probably going to be something like black. Okay. And also, it sees everything, and it's in perspective. A good thing to do is instead of putting it in perspective, take it out of perspective mode and put it into orthographic mode. So it makes it flat. And when you do that, it doesn't matter how high the camera is. It matters how the size of the camera is. So let's make it 10. Maybe even bigger than that, like, because that's only looking at one block at a time. So maybe 15 or 20. So 15, like that. Now the camera is looking up from way above. I've kind of positioned it outside the scene, like this. And you can see the box that represents the camera. That's what the camera can see. Here's another thing. The distance doesn't have to be 1,000, right? It only needs to see like 40 or 50. Let's move this down to like 40. Okay, 50. How about that? That'll cover pretty much everything. Let's see. Even 40 might be okay. Let's see. 40. Yeah, we're good. 40 is good. Okay, so that's what the camera covers. And that's the orthographic camera. So this camera that's tied into the player, we're going to rename Minimap Cam. So Minimap Cam. Okay, there it is. Minimap Cam. So far, so good. And we're going to make some other changes here eventually. But for now, let's leave the culling mask as everything. That means it sees everything. All right. Now, next part. What I want to do on the canvas, which is where everything is going to be. Next to, so the reticule itself in the gun, if you look at it, right, if I play the game for a second, the little dot in the middle of the canvas is the reticule, right? And that's actually part of the canvas. It's just a little image that's empty, right? Oh, also notice that I have this warning that says there are 2 audio listeners because I added another Minimap camera. I need to delete the audio listener, so we don't have that error. Back to the canvas for a second. So in the canvas is where I want to add in my UI image. And there's the image. And if I go to the actual canvas itself, and what we're going to call this, it's not in the reticule, it's inside the canvas. If I go to the image itself, it looks like this. It's in the middle of our screen, right? We don't want it to be here. We want it to be kind of at the bottom left corner of our screen, or at the top right, top left or top right. Some kind of corner of the screen. You choose to where you want to have it. And my recommendation is make it something like 200 by like 200. Again, you can make it smaller or bigger. It's up to you how you want it. I think it's got to be visible. And I think if I position it towards the left corner of the screen, my position should be something like 130 or maybe 125 by 125. If it's relative to the bottom left-hand corner. But again, I positioned it with the rect transform, so it's relative to the bottom left. All right, so it's kind of hovering at the bottom left. Okay, cool. So if you look at the image, this image here is where our Minimap is going to be. So I'm just going to call it Minimap. So it's on the canvas. Now, if I play the game, just to show you where it hovers right here. It kind of takes a spot right inside the game. And again, all it is a blank image right now. Now, if you notice, the image itself has the space to take a material. Here's a material. We don't have a material yet for this, so we need to create it. Okay, that's number one. We need that. Also, the Minimap cam has a space where the target texture can go. It means I can project my Minimap to a texture, not to the screen, right? So almost like a moving screen if I want, right? So that's where I can produce this Minimap wherever I like. Okay? So I need a texture and I need a material. Those 2 things I need. Let's go back to textures first. So in textures, right here, I'm going to add a new, as a special texture, right? Called a render texture is what I need. That's the render texture. The render texture, I'm going to name Minimap. The Minimap texture is a special, and it's, because it's a render texture, it's a special texture that allows you to render images to it dynamically. Okay, that's what this Minimap does. Now, in the materials, I'm going to add a Minimap material too. So I'm going to right-click, create, new material. We're going to call this Minimap. Okay. Notice that the shader type is standard. That can't be. It's got to be unlit, transparent. That's where it's got to be. Unlit, transparent. That's the shader type of the material. And if you notice, you can choose what the texture is, or drag and drop, whatever you prefer. If you have a texture, like for example Minimap, I can just drag and drop it into there, and then it'll appear here. And it'll give you an example of what it looks like down here. It looks like this little fisheye lens. Okay, so I've got a couple things. Actually there's 4 things I've added so far. A Minimap cam that's tied to the player. An image that is called Minimap that's going to be displayed on the canvas. A new render texture, that's where the Minimap, the actual camera, is going to display the texture, display the Minimap itself, right? The render texture. A material that holds the texture. And now the final step, or there's a couple more steps. in my Minimap cam, there's two steps. I need to target the texture that I'm going to render everything, and it's got to go to Minimap. This piece. That's the texture, the render texture I made. And then in my canvas, right? I also got to target the same material, which is called under Materials, Minimap. And it appears. So there's like 6 or 7 steps, but all they are is creating this Minimap that allows you to see everything. Okay? Let's check this out and see if it works. Right? So run. And you can see now that as I turn, the Minimap turns. Right? If I walk, the Minimap changes. And it can help me when it comes to navigation to see where I'm going and where I've been. Right? I can see where I'm actually going. And if this is too big, as an example, like you can see that the Minimap itself, as I walk in here, right? It's kind of a weird ground over here, right? That we've created. It tells me where I am, right? And if you don't like this, if this is too small for you, right? Like it's or not big enough or not a high enough view, you can do that. You can change things around. Let's change it around. Notice again, I chose transparent. If I went back to the Minimap material and change it from unlit transparent to just unlit texture, it makes it all black on the outside, like this, right? So if I press play now, you can see now that everything that's dead. If I go into the spaces, I can see where the blackness is, and the blackness represents I'm off the edge, right? Remember, this is supposed to be like an indoor scene, right? So if I want to make it really look like an indoor scene, I can take away from the scene itself. First, I'll save the scene. But I can take away, in the lighting, my default skybox. I can take that away, right, from this scene. And I can use, instead of a skybox, a color that I can choose to be whatever I want, right? I can also choose a skybox material, which I already have, which is this, background, which makes it pure black. Now, what does this do? It makes it so that my scene is quite dark, right? And it's much scarier because when I come over here, and if I fall into oblivion, I fall to my death, right? So I can make this kind of dark shadows or whatever, right? Let's pre-bake the lights so that way we have a little bit better performance. So build, pre-bakes everything, go in. Sometimes also what you want to do is add additional lighting, right? And I didn't really cover this in the first part, but if I want to go into the scene, so let's go back into that first scene, the first tile that we got from Pedro. Right? So I'm going to kind of frame select that tile by using the F key. And if I want to light the scene up a little bit more with additional lights, I can certainly add lights. So I'm going to kind of add a light. If I want a point lamp, I can totally do that. And what this can do is it can create additional lights that kind of appear in the scene, like maybe in this corner over here. And you can do that. You can add more lights to light up the scene, especially if it's in a dark scene like this. So again, I'm going to Control D or Command D on the Mac, put them over here. And just move them around where you want them to make sense. So maybe kind of balancing them off where you want them in the scene. I want them kind of near the other pillars there. There we go. So a couple of pillars have light, the other ones don't. Let's add them in too. So again, Control D or Command D on the Mac. Bring them over here, light that area up too, if I want to. Remember, we're gonna bake these lights, so it's not gonna be an issue because it's pretty dark, right? All right, so a few lights in the scene. Let's bake the lights. So we're going to build. Right? There we go. And if you ever want to do it again, you can do it, right? It's going to look through the light scenes and see what it can bake. And if you go in here, you can see now that there's a little bit more illumination in certain places. It doesn't help with some places. Like this is a really dark area, right? Because it's the way it's been cast, right? And also, you can increase illumination by using spotlights and other things, right? Like, for example, I really want to add lighting in a particular area, like these areas. I want to cast light down on these 4 squares. I could, at about this level here, right, add another light to the scene, which would be more like a spotlight. So kind of add a new light, and we'll do a spotlight. And what we'll do is bring this light out. And one thing to note is that if I go to the inspector, right, the range of the light is important, because the longer the range, and it should be something like, if this is I'll make it the same size as the camera, so 30, there should be something like at least 40, the range of the light. The angle is really important because that tells you how wide it is, so like 60, or even wider, like 120. It's kind of a wide angle light. I can also increase the intensity, make it quite intense in certain areas. Right? Shadows type, I can add shadows, some soft shadows generated from the light, if I really want to do that. And it also tells me what type of light I want to make. Spot is a type, baking is real time. I can also make it baked, if I really want to, right? And then I can go back to my lighting and pre-bake my lights again. Beautiful. Now if I play the scene, it's going to look a little different. A little bit more lights with more shadows and some areas that aren't lit. Let's make it quite a spooky scene. Again, I did this a little differently than the morning class because I was thinking about some stuff to make it more interesting. Some people have done a little spotlight game. Like I know that we had Eddie. He did a little spotlight game. You did a little spotlight game. So we'll add a little spotlight to the scene as well, right? Don't worry, it's not your fault. It's my fault that I'm doing this. Or actually, you know what? Just leave it. We'll leave it alone. What I will do, though, is for my ambient color, I can choose my ambient color. Right now is black, right? My reflection source is a skybox, and there's no light. There's no sun lamp, right? So I can choose the directional light for that. For my sun. My ambient GI is real time. I can make it also baked. Right? Be careful with this stuff. It can make it thing. Also gradient, I can choose a different gradient. For my sky color, my equatorial color, I can make it kind of white or kind of in the middle. To kind of add another additional ambient light in my scene. The brighter you make it, the more ambient light it'll have. Okay. And again, what I want to do is build. It's always good to bake your lights, increases performance. All right, so now we have a lot of light in this one, and we can see where we're going. So I kind of took away the whole need for a spotlight. But there's areas here that, you're like, hey, what's down here? What's done? Ah, and you die, right? So that would be really bad. So if you see a black door, it's not a place to go. But the great thing is it helps you with the minimap. So if you kind of look at the minimap, you can see that you're heading towards death. Now there's a problem. You can see the gun, right? If you really look carefully, if I go out to other areas, you can see that eventually you'll see the gun. The other thing to do is the ground color. If you want to make it, instead of black, you can make it red, right? For the ground color, you can actually color the way things look. So if I kind of go back and play, you can make it so everything is colored weird, right? Like you have a bunch of stuff that has a bit of a color, a tone to everything, right? So you can so it looks different when you're walking, like out to the blackness. You can see now that the blackness has a little bit of a different color than everything else. Red was really extreme. I'm probably going to go with something closer to black again, more of a lighter color for the grounds, right? So a little bit more, color that's baked in. So you can see the difference, the edges, which is what you want to see. Okay, so kind of a tricolor build. Bake. Okay, once everything has been baked and we have everything, we're kind of good, but we really don't know what we're looking at. Here's something that we have a problem with. Our character, our player, right? I can see his gun because his gun is on the gun layer. I don't want my minimap to see the gun layer. And the way you can take that away is with the culling mask. Right now it sees everything. I can turn it so it does not see the gun layer. And if I don't see the gun layer, then when I play, I can't see the gun. See? So now no matter where I go on this in the scene, I can't see my player. If you want also something else, if the scene is pretty dark, you don't want a flashlight, but you want ambient color to follow the player, like he's holding a torch or something, right? You can also do that. You can say add a light to the player. So if I go to light, we'll make it a point light on the player object itself, right? Again, with the player, we can also bake the lights. We'll make it baked, right, if you want. And if I kind of focus in on the player now, you can see that he's got quite a bit of light around him. So he kind of glows, right? Shadow types. Will the player cast shadows? You can say no, right? It's just enough so we have light that's happening. And I can move the point lamp kind of above the player's head. And if I do that, then it looks like this. So whenever I go into a dark place, I can kind of still see, right? Which is okay. It's spooky, but it's not like totally spooky, right? And I can see that there's the exit way over there. And as I go through, I can see that I'm getting closer to the exit. And when eventually, I should be able to see this cylinder that's kind of floating in midair. All right, but wouldn't it be nice, this is what the Minimap's all about, wouldn't it be nice if you kind of had a different layout where you could see, let's kind of zoom in there for a second to fix that problem, so I don't want it to float as much. Sorry, just want to make sure it looks like it's hitting the ground plane. Right. It's good enough. They can't tell anyway. Now, again, I wouldn't mind if this glowed, this little cylinder here, right? Does anyone have a recommendation on how to make it glow? Remember, this is the what I've got here. Here's specular alpha. I've got no emission, but remember, I can change the standard to whatever I want, right? I can make this to whatever I want. I can increase the emission value as well, right? Now, for this, I need some kind of texture. If you notice, there's a texture that's missing here. So if I just do like an emission of like 4, right? It doesn't really do much. It doesn't emit, right? Typically, it just makes it white, right? So if I go to 1, right? And the color I can choose, instead of an emissive bright color, I can make it so that it's more green, like a lime green or even a darker green. There we go. Global illumination, baked, right? I always want to go with baked, right? Because if you do that kind of stuff, it can glow a little bit. If I really want to, again, I can increase the glow, like make it even brighter. Right? Be careful with this because it can really glow a lot, right? An example of this is if I play, I didn't bake it. Hold on a second. You have to see that what I'm talking about, and it can look really nice. Like you can actually spend some really cool time doing this without going too crazy. Okay, good. Let's try it again. So I'm going to kind of go and see if I can see the scene. I'm going forward, and again, if you see, obviously down there is death, right? Because I know where I'm turning, and it's kind of over there is death too, right? So I'm kind of going the wrong direction. I can see that right now, right? So maybe it's over here. I kind of go here, and I go over here, and I get a couple lights, and I'll do a little bit of running. without killing myself, and I'm trying to find the way out, and I'm having a lot of trouble. Notice my Minimap is really close, right? So again, what I want to do is if I want to have more detail, I can pull my Minimap out even more. So here's my Minimap cam. Right now it's at 15. We can make it go bigger, like 25, right? The challenge with that is when it goes really big, then you see less detail. Like I know where I am, right? And if I go down one path, and if it's the wrong path, I'll know ahead of time that it's wrong. This isn't the way to go, right? However, seeing where I am on the Minimap, right now, there's no way of doing so. And we're going to make that happen in a second. So maybe it's this way, right? So I can kind of wander down here and I can start seeing what I'm looking at right now. And there's a dead end. But where am I? I don't know. Let's make it happen. So let's go back to me. Okay. I'm going to focus on me. And what I want to do is I want to add a sprite to the player. Right? So I'm going to right-click on the player, and I want to have a new 2D object, sprite. Okay. Right now, there's no sprite associated with it, but of course, I included a material for you guys. If we go to Textures, there's the player sprite. And if I drag and drop, I can see that the player sprite is positioned incorrectly up, like this. But I want to rotate it across the x-axis 90 degrees. So if you look at the x-axis, I want to rotate it so it's down, like this. But this is bad. And by the way, I'll make a new default layer, a new layer called marker. This is the marker layer. Right? And we'll do two things with the marker layer. With this new sprite that I made, I'll call it the marker. Right? It'll be part of the marker layer. Right? And my regular camera shouldn't be able to see it. So if I kind of run, if I look down, I shouldn't be able to see that. That's a sprite, right? That's kind of weird. I shouldn't see the sprite on the ground or even in the air, right? So that means that my player cam in the calling mask cannot see the gun and cannot see the marker. Can't see the marker. So if I look down now, no marker, right? Doesn't exist. I can't see it. It's there. And you can do a lot of that kind of tricky stuff where you can make one camera not see something, but yet another camera see it, and to create a layered effect. Okay, that's cool. I can do the same thing with my my other camera. So in my player, my Minimap camera, right? It sees the marker, but it doesn't see the gun. Okay, so it can see the marker. So if I run it now, you can see that. You can see my marker, but it's pretty small. See where it is? It's like really small, right? It's way down there. You see it? So a couple of things I can do. I can position my marker, right? So if I go back to my marker itself, this is why it's kind of weird to bring it up high. And normally if it was perspective, I could just bring my marker up like, you know, something like 20 meters up in the air, right? And it would appear higher up than everything else. And it'd be on top of the player's character, or you know, the player's marker, player's game object. So it would look kind of something like this. But unfortunately for me, it doesn't really matter what I do, right? Sorry, 1 second. It doesn't matter what I do. When I'm using an orthographic camera, it's always going to be the same size because it doesn't resize stuff from a perspective, right? So there's a couple of things I could do. I could make my sprite bigger, right? Now there's a danger to this. The danger is if I make my sprite too big, I can't see, you know, my player. It won't be in perspective, right? That's one thing. So I have to adjust. I have to always make sure that my camera and my sprite are have the right sizes. So my Minimap cam right now is 25. It's probably too big. If I move it to 20, you can see that my sprite becomes a little bigger, right? me show you what that looks like. Kind of see my sprite now. Still too small, in my opinion. The other thing to do is I can make my sprite wider, right? So if I look at my marker, right? And here's the default material, right? Here's my ordering layer and my sorting layer and all that kind of stuff. And if I go to the actual object, so if I go back to textures, and if I look at my player texture, and notice that the pixels per unit is 100, right? I can reduce this. Remember we talked about this before in 2D. How do I make it bigger? Make this smaller. Because now it's 100. The ratio is 100 to 1, right? So if I go something like 50 to 1, just saying, right? And I kind of look and see what it looks like now. Oh. It's much bigger, right? You can see that it's twice the size of what it was. And you can kind of see it now on the map. You can see that I'm getting to the edge of this wall, right? Or you can see where I'm traveling into the dark zone. Like this probably is not a good idea to go beyond this point, right? So I can see where I am now on the map, right? Slowly, slowly. There I am. I'm traveling along, and it's above everything else, so I can see it, and it's not being able. But if I keep going, that's obviously death, right? Death in the form of whatever, right? And I've got my little lamp. My lamp is kind of along with me, so you can see as I jump that behind me leaves a little bit of fog because my lamp is lighting the way to give me a little bit of more visibility as I walk through. Right? Now you can see this is wrong too. This is the wrong place to go. And down here, death, if I went down to this area, right? Because you can see that it ends there and then there's nothing there. So if I was to trap going there, and I would fall to oblivion, right? Okay, this is nice. It's pretty good. And you know, again, there's no direction, so it's in a maze. It still gives me my maze effect. Like I still don't know where I'm going to go. I need to find something like this kind of building, right? And you could add additional markers and stuff to, you know, to help you out. But this is the essence of a minimap. Minimap is there to help you. Questions so far? Lots of parts about the minimap. Yes. Only certain lights? Yeah. Which camera? The minimap camera. If you only wanted to see certain lights but not other lights, yeah, you could. So you put that light in a layer. You put the light in the same layer. The flashlight? No, I'll show you. You can make it disappear altogether. Because what happens is the flashlight, it causes shadows, right? And depending on which layer it's on, right? If you don't want it to see the flashlight, you can take that away. Like you can take that, so it's not, it doesn't see the flashlight or the light itself, right? So it's not that difficult to do. Like for example, let's say I'm gonna show. Okay, just to fix that problem, I'm gonna put a flashlight on my guy. All right, just for you, and then we'll take it away. All right, so if I go back to my player itself, and let's change my spot, which I have already here. Here's my point light. I'm going to change it from a point light to a spotlight. Okay, and it's going to be directly in front of me, which means I have to rotate this across the y-axis this way. I think no, actually, it's probably right in front, pointing the right direction. Let's undo that change. So spotlight, the range is 10. That's fine. And the color, I'll make the color so we can see the color. We'll make it yellow. So there's a yellow lamp that we have right there in the spotlight. Let me see it. Let's see if that works. And we don't see crap. Let us zoom in and see what's going on. Yeah. Oh, that's why, because it's right way above me. So I'll put it like kind of lower down so we can see it now. And let's make it so that is baked. So we'll say real time instead of baked, right? And we'll cast shadows because it's the kind of light it is to cast shadows. And we'll make it really intense. We'll make an intensity of 2. Okay. And let's see if it works now. Nope. So let's just make a new light. Get rid of the point lamp, and we'll add another lamp, a new lamp, which is spotlight. There we go. And we'll make it really intense. So we'll make intensity of 2. We're in the camera? We should put it in the camera? Oh yeah, because that way it will move. That's right. So we'll put it in the player camera. That's right. There we go. So by that way, if we move, we'll see the spotlight moving around, right? Yeah, there we go. Okay, and we'll make it really intense and different color, like we said. Well, thank you for that. I would have figured it out eventually. Make it really kind of a different color. Yellow. That's kind of a puce yellow, but I don't know. This is more of an intense yellow. There we go. And we'll make it so that the intensity is like 5. Really intense. And yeah, so bright yellow color, right? And maybe what we also have to do is make the angle bigger. I always told you that the angle should be probably around 60, you know, that kind of thing. The range shouldn't be 10, should be like 20, right? So it can be really bright. And then when you walk through, you see that the light is right there. In the Minimap, look at the Minimap. Don't worry about this. If you look at the Minimap, you can see the lamp, right? So you walk through, and now you can see different parts as you're illuminating through the object. So you're not being surprised by what you're seeing, right? So kind of look at that. I want to get rid of it from the Minimap, right? That's what you're saying. So the lamp, the spotlight itself, which we'll call flashlight, right? The flashlight itself, we'll put it on its own layer. So we'll put it on the flashlight layer. And once we do that, the Minimap camera itself will not see it, the flashlight layer itself. Right? So we'll say flashlight layer, not going to see it. Now, you're saying it still sees it. And if you look over here as a preview, it still does see the light. It won't see the lamp itself, but the light it does see. So it won't see the illumination from the lamp, but only the light. Well, the funny thing is the rendering path, right? Of the light. So if I go to sort of the flashlight and cast no shadows, let's cast shadows, why not? And I think there's an area that tells you where it is reflecting. What is picking up the light itself? So flare, render mode, no, culling mask, here it is. So the light itself, right? So notice that it renders to everything. So it shines on everything, okay? But if I go nothing, can't see the light. No one can see the light. If I go default, only the default can see the light, right? So only the default stuff, but not everything else. So if I show it now, if I go in the game, this is the preview, so that didn't quite work what I wanted to do, right? If we make it so that only the maze can see the light, right? Then I have to make it so that every other piece in the game is called the maze, right? I was able to do this last time. Let's see if I can pull this off without wasting too much time. So move the player up a little bit just from an organizational perspective. And the gate, the canvas, we'll move that up to the player, above the player, because we don't care about that either. But the gate, and yeah, this is spotlight and the exit. We'll move all this down to, should it sign on spotlight? Sure, all this stuff. So all this stuff, right, we'll make it part of a new layer, right, which we'll call this the maze layer, right? And we'll go back to this. Hold on a second to try that again one more time. So gate all the way down to exit. All this we'll add into the maze layer. And no, this object only. Yes, and all of its children, sure. Okay, so that's all these objects, including their children, are all part of the maze layer. Now, the light. Let's go back to that funny light you had. My player's light, which is the flashlight, where it shines, the culling mask, is only the maze layer. See how that works, right? So that's the only place it shines. Now that should stop in the game for you seeing the light, because calling mask for the camera, which is check away default for a second. Calling mask for the camera, which is the Minimap cam, right? Which is what it sees. If you see, all it sees is nothing. If you see nothing, nothing appears. And if I go default, or see if I can go with, if I see the maze, and I see the light. Default in the light. And I definitely want to see, I want to not see anything else. I don't care about the gun or the marker. I definitely want to see, because I won't be able to see the character anymore. But that's the kind of stuff you do. You kind of say, I only want to see the marker without the maze tiles, like this. And see how you see the marker by itself? Same kind of thing you want to do. You want to kind of make it so that the bottom of the maze, right, like the bottom, the floor of the maze has its own layer, right? That has nothing to do with the layer that you're seeing above. So you see the floor plan of the maze, but you don't see the walls, right? And then if you were to do that, then you could shine the light on the actual walls of the maze, which your character can see, but your minimap wouldn't see it. It would just see the maze tiles. That's all it would see. Now we don't have that. We'd have to kind of create that pattern for ourselves. But that's the way you would do it. It's a little bit more complex to do, but it's almost like you have to separate the floor of the maze from the rest of it, or almost make another image that can only be perceived by the camera that's above. Okay, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's the way you do it. You would have to put it into the flashlight. Every light shines in a certain layer, right? And so only that layer can see the light. Nothing else can see that light. But because your camera can see the same layer, then it can see the light too, because the light's shining on it. That's why it's doing it. If that makes sense. Okay, let's get rid of that flashlight because I don't need it. Okay. So I want to make an enemy. And I think it's important to do this. I'll make the enemy and then I'll stop, because what what we want to do is kind of create a way. And let me put my Minimap cam so I can see everything again. I'll see both, but nothing else. What I want to see is in my Minimap, I want to be able to see myself, and I want to be able to see enemies. Enemies will be red, right? But I need an enemy to practice with. So inside my scene, I'm going to create an enemy that I'm going to place in my scene. I'm going to put it right in front of me in the beginning. Okay, now last time we did move towards with vector. Vector 3, very simple move towards object thing. And what I want to do here in my main scene, and I'm going to attach it to the player at first. I'm going to right click. I'm going to add a new 3D object called cylinder. It's right, actually, undo. New 3D object called capsule. I like the capsule idea. There's my capsule. All right, but now it's part of the player. And what I want to do is I want to pull this capsule away from the player and make it its own. So the capsule, it starts in the same place as the player. We're going to move it away, right? And it's kind of white. It's kind of looking pretty ugly, right? So what I want to do, I want to make this capsule red. So I'm going to go into my materials. I'm going to add in new material, which I'm going to call enemy. That's my enemy material. I'm going to change the standard to standard specular setup, and I'm going to go with a red material, and I'm going to go very, very shiny, right? So it's very shiny, right? With specular alpha and all that stuff. Okay. I also wanted to emit light, so I'm going to emit red light, and it doesn't have to be that much. Something in the middle. And the emission is going to be quite bright. So we're going to say, what if I move it to 2? Yeah, it's too much. Let's go back down to what I thought it was going to be around there. There we go. All right, so there's my emission spectrum. It's kind of red. And what I want to do is I want to tie it to this object. So if I look at my enemy object, right, which is my new capsule. I want to call the capsule enemy. I'm going to pull in this material on top of the enemy, so we make it look like an enemy. So here's enemy material. It's red. Right now, it looks like some kind of red object. It doesn't glow or anything, but just kind of, it's got its own light. To make it more interesting, we can add a light to the enemy, right? And we can also add in, so first we'll add a light. So if you really want to be special, right? And to find out which way it's facing, now, I want you to notice something about objects. So if I click on my player, right? And if I click on, if I try to move my player in different directions, right? So here's my player. It's my player cam. You see that this arrow is pointing along the same as the gun, right? So too is the enemy, right? The enemy actually is pointing this way. And what I want to do with the enemy is point him at the player. So let's rotate him across the y-axis, right, by 90 degrees, or actually 180 degrees. There we go. Now the enemy is pointing at the player. And what I want to do with the enemy is add a spotlight. We'll make a spotlight for the enemy, and we'll make it so that it glows red. Right? So we'll call this the enemy vision. Right? And we'll make the spotlight glow red. And we'll give it an intensity of about 2. Well, maybe 3. So pretty bright. Range is like 30. Now, if you look at what he's doing, he's projecting right onto the player, like this big red band, right, of light. So it tells you where the enemy's looking, actually. And we'll also add a marker to the enemy. So we'll add in a 2D object sprite. Oops. And the sprite will be called a marker, which will have a layer. That's the marker layer, right? So it's being viewed by it'll be viewed by the Minimap camera, right? And we need a sprite to go with this. So we're going to go to textures. And we're going to take my enemy and we're going to put it up here. And my texture itself, we'll make it really big because we did the same thing with my player. And if I go back to my enemy marker, apply. If I go to my enemy marker, notice that it is positioned incorrectly. It looks like wings right now, like some kind of weird thing, which doesn't make any sense. I want to rotate it across the x-axis 90 degrees. Okay. Notice now it points at the player, right? Okay, cool. So save that. And I want to put it, just from a position perspective, I want to put it so it's like 20 up. So again, if you see what it looks like, it's kind of, this is where the enemy is, where the player is, right? On the mini map, you can see the enemy and the player right there, right? That's what it would look like. And you should be able to also see on the mini map, if I play without moving anything on the player itself, you can see that the enemy just sits there, but there's no glow, right? There's no glow. It shows here, but like we saw before, can't see what the light looks like. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because it's too high up, right? So if I was going to go to the enemy's vision, right, which is just another light, I might want to put it as close to the ground as possible so you can see it. So see how it looks, right? And I may want to draw up the intensity even more, like 6 or something, or even 10, right? Like that. Kind of looks like just like the light is on you. He's shining on you. He can see you, right? If I look at it now, right, you can see that the enemy is what the enemy is looking at. It's hard to see because of the kind of type of tile we're on, but you can see when he's coming at you, you can see him in a darker space. If it's too narrow and if it's too hard to see, you can always change the spot angle to 60. Right? So now that the angle will come at you with as the enemy's coming at you, right? So you can see that the player is clearly in the enemy's sight. And I kind of glow red when he has me. He kind of makes me glow red too, right? So I'm under attack, or I'm in trouble if he's that close, right? I couldn't do this in the day. I'm sorry, I didn't have time. I had too many issues. Okay, so this is the one piece that's really cool, right? One thing we need to do, of course, is bake the lights just to make sure that there's no other issues, because that we did a lot of different kinds of lighting effects, and I want to make sure that's okay. All right, I think it's a great place to stop. And when we come back, I'll enable much more complex enemy UI, or AI, so that they can come at us, right? And they'll follow us anywhere on the map, which is what you guys have been waiting for.